October 12, 1943. A windowless briefing room deep within the chalky subsoil of RAF High Wycombe. The air is thick, a stale cocktail of yesterday's pipe smoke, damp wool uniforms, and the metallic tang of anxiety. Maps of northern France cover an entire wall, a spiderweb of red and black ink indicating flak corridors, fighter patrol zones, and bombing targets. At the head of a long oak table stands Wing Commander Arthur Davies. He's a man of average height, with thinning hair and the weary eyes of an engineer who has spent too many nights wrestling with insoluble problems. Before him sit the architects of Britain's air war over Europe, men with scrambled eggs on their caps and the weight of thousands of lives on their shoulders. Air Vice Marshal Trafford, a bulldog of a man whose face seems permanently locked in a scowl of disapproval, taps a thick finger on the table. The silence stretches, taut and uncomfortable. Davies has just concluded his presentation. He hasn't shown them schematics for a new bomb sight or a more powerful engine. He hasn't proposed a new formation for the Lancaster bombers that might save a few more crews on the nightly road to Berlin. He has presented them with a small four-pronged piece of metal. It looks like a child's toy, a jack. "Let me be certain I understand you, Wing Commander." Air Vice Marshal Trafford's voice is a low rumble, laced with a dangerous lack of amusement. "You have been tasked by Special Operations to devise a method for neutralizing the Luftwaffe's forward airfields, specifically Abbeville-Drucat, home of Jagdgeschwader 26's Focke-Wulfs that are tearing our daylight raids to pieces. And your grand solution is this?" He picks up the object from the table, holding it between his thumb and forefinger as if it were a dead insect. "Yes, sir," Davies says, his voice steady despite the prickling heat on his neck. "It's a modified Caltrop, forged from case-hardened steel. Each spike is precisely 3 inches long, tapered to a needlepoint, and fluted to maximize structural damage to rubber. No matter how it lands, one point is always facing skyward. We call it the Tire Spike Mark I. A younger squadron leader at the end of the table snorts, then quickly tries to disguise it as a cough. But the dam of military decorum is broken. A ripple of incredulous chuckles spreads through the room. Trafford allows himself a grim smile. "A Caltrop, Davies, a weapon used by the Roman legions to stop chariots. You're going to stop a 400-mile-per-hour fighter with a metal spike?" The briefing room erupts in laughter. It's not cruel, not entirely. It's the exhausted, cynical laughter of men who have seen 100 brilliant, complicated ideas fail in the face of enemy fire. The sheer, almost childish simplicity of Davies' plan strikes them as absurd. They are fighting a war of superchargers, radar, and 1,000-pound bombs, and he brings them a medieval toy. The FW-190 has tires an inch thick, reinforced with steel core. Another officer interjects, wiping a tear of mirth from his eye. "You'd need a bloody anti-tank round to pierce them on the ground." "With respect, sir, that's not correct," Davies presses on, his knuckles white as he grips the edge of the lectern. "The tire is at its most vulnerable when under maximum stress and pressure, not when it's static, but when it's bearing the full 14,000-pound weight of the aircraft, accelerating to over 150 miles per hour on the takeoff roll. Our calculations show that at that velocity, the pressure exerted on the tip of this spike is over 50,000 pounds per square inch. It won't just puncture the tire, it will cause a catastrophic blowout. The landing gear will collapse, the wing will drop. The aircraft becomes an uncontrolled, fuel-laden projectile." The laughter subsides, replaced by a patronizing skepticism. They've heard 1,000 theories from boffins in back rooms. Reality on a windswept enemy airfield is another matter entirely. "And how precisely do you intend to deploy these jacks?" Trafford asks, dropping the spike back on the table with a dismissive clink. "Are you going to have a platoon of commandos sneak onto the runway and scatter them by hand?" "We've developed a canister, sir," Davies explains, gesturing to a diagram on his easel. "A modified 500-pound bomb casing. It's designed to split open at a preset altitude, just 200 feet. It doesn't explode. It disperses. One canister can seat a 2,000-foot stretch of runway with over 5,000 spikes, an invisible minefield of sharp steel, laid in seconds." Trafford leans back, steepling his fingers. He looks around the room, at the faces of his commanders. They're waging a brutal war of attrition. They are losing too many planes, too many men. The pressure from Whitehall is immense. They need a miracle, but this feels like a joke. "It's ancient," one group captain mutters, just loud enough to be heard. "It's a schoolboy prank." The Air Vice Marshal fixes his gaze on Davies. The room falls silent again,
sensing a final judgment. "Wing Commander, your enthusiasm is noted, but we cannot afford to waste a sortie, let alone a valuable Mosquito and its crew, on a wild goose chase based on medieval weaponry. The idea is rejected." A wave of relief and disappointment washes over Davies. He expected this, but he had to try. He begins to gather his papers, the metal spike feeling heavy and foolish in his pocket. "However," Trafford's voice cuts through his thoughts, "SOE is not under my direct command, and Lord Selborne's office seems strangely fond of your unconventional methods. They have authorized one aircraft, for a single attempt. If it fails, this entire ridiculous project is to be buried so deep it will never be spoken of again. If your crew is lost, their families will be told they went down over the North Sea on a weather reconnaissance flight. Do you understand, Davies?" Davies looks up, his heart pounding. It's not a vote of confidence. It's a death sentence for his idea, or permission to prove them all wrong. There is no middle ground. "Perfectly, sir." Trafford nods, a final dismissive gesture. "Then get on with it, and for God's sake, don't come back to this room until you have something more to show me than a blacksmith's trinket."
The mission, codenamed Operation Puncture, existed only on paper in a locked file and in the minds of 4 men. One was Arthur Davies. The other 3 belonged to the RAF's 139 Squadron, a unit specializing in flying the de Havilland Mosquito on missions that officially never happened. The aircraft itself was a masterpiece of wartime innovation, a machine built not of metal, but of spruce, birch plywood, and balsa, earning it the nickname the Wooden Wonder. It was light, incredibly fast, and possessed a notoriously small radar cross-section, making it a ghost to German detection systems. For this task, it was perfect. The pilot was Flight Lieutenant Alistair Evans, a 24-year-old Welshman with the steady hands of a surgeon and an unnerving comfort with flying at altitudes more suited to seagulls than bombers. His navigator, Flying Officer James Gentleman Jim Harrington, was a quiet, meticulous Londoner who could plot a course on the back of a cigarette packet and find a single building in the dark heart of the Reich. In the cold, damp quiet of a Nissen hut at RAF Marham, Davies laid out the plan to them. There was no grand speech, no appeal to patriotism. These men dealt in facts, fuel loads, and flak probabilities. Evans ran a hand through his slicked-back hair, his eyes fixed on the aerial reconnaissance photo of Abbeville-Drucat Airfield. 200 feet, you said? Over the main runway? That's the release altitude, Davies confirmed, pointing with a pencil. Any higher and the dispersal pattern is too wide. Any lower and you risk hitting the control tower. You'll be flying a straight, level pass directly down the center line. No deviation. Harrington adjusted his spectacles, his brow furrowed in calculation. The approach will be the devil's own work. We'll have to come in from the southwest, over the Somme estuary, stay below 50 feet all the way from the coast to the target perimeter, to stay under their Freya radar umbrella. It's a 15-mile run over occupied territory at treetop height, in the dark. It's the only way, Davies said quietly. You need to achieve total surprise. They can't see you, they can't hear you until it's too late. The moment you release the canisters, Alistair, you firewall those Merlins and you don't stop climbing until you're back over the channel. They will throw up everything they have. Evans leaned closer, studying the photo. What about the payload? 2 500-pounders. That's standard, but you say they don't explode. That's correct, Davies replied. They're designated container, dispersal, type cage. Inside each casing are 2,600 individual spikes packed in sawdust. A barometric fuse will trigger the casing to split open at precisely 200 feet. The contents will rain down, silently. The only sound will be the whisper of your engines as you depart. For a long moment, the 2 crewmen were silent. They had dropped bombs that leveled city blocks. They had dropped photographic flares that turned night into day. This was different. It felt less like war and more like sabotage. It was subtle, almost insidious. "So we risk our necks to sprinkle some nails on their driveway?" Evans said, not with sarcasm, but with a genuine need for clarification. The absurdity of it all hung in the air. "You are turning their single most valuable asset, that flat, clear runway, into their greatest liability," explained Davies, his voice imbued with a passion that had been absent in the high white dome briefing room. "Every pilot who scrambles from that field trusts that runway implicitly. He's focused on the sky, on the enemy. The last thing he will ever suspect is that the very ground beneath him has been turned into a weapon. If this works, we don't just destroy a few aircraft. We sow chaos. We create paranoia. Every takeoff becomes a gamble. We force them to sweep every inch of their tarmac before every single flight, wasting thousands of man-hours. We cripple their response time." Harrington, the pragmatist, saw it. He nodded slowly. The psychological impact could be significant. Evans remained focused on the mechanics. 200 feet, straight and level. They'll have 20mm flak towers at both ends of the runway. We'll be flying right between them.
It's a shooting gallery, which is why you'll be in and out in less than 30 seconds. By the time their gunners are awake and at their stations, you'll be a silhouette against the stars, heading for home. The final preparations were made in secret. The 2 Type H containers, painted a dull, non-reflective black, were loaded into the Mosquito's bomb bay by a special ground crew from the SOE. They looked no different from standard high-explosive bombs, but they felt inert, lifeless. The aircraft itself, a Mosquito B Mark IV, was fueled to the brim. Its twin Rolls-Royce Merlin engines were run up, their distinctive, throaty roar a familiar comfort in the growing twilight. As Evans and Harrington did their final walk-around, checking the control surfaces and tires of their own aircraft, the irony was not lost on them. Davies stood with them on the hardstand, the wind whipping across the flat Norfolk landscape. "I don't need to tell you the importance," he said, his voice nearly lost in the wind. "The men who laughed at this idea are the same men who send 100 bomber streams into hell every night. They're not bad men, they just believe in sledgehammers. I happen to think a scalpel can be more effective." He looked at Evans. "Get that runway, Alistair. Just get the runway." Evans pulled on his helmet and gave a curt nod. "We'll put your jacks right where they need to be, sir. Don't you worry." He and Harrington climbed the small ladder and settled into the cramped cockpit. The Perspex canopy was closed, sealing them in their own small world of dials, switches, and the smell of oil and ozone. With a final check, Evans gave a thumbs up. The Merlin engines coughed to life, first one, then the other, settling into a synchronized, powerful hum. The wooden ghost trembled, eager to be unleashed. As it taxied toward the runway, its dark form melting into the deepening gloom, Davies watched it go. He had staked his reputation and the lives of 2 good men on a 3-inch piece of steel. Now there was nothing left to do but wait for the dawn.
October 14th, 1943, 02:17 a.m. 50 feet above the choppy, ink-black surface of the English Channel. Inside the Mosquito, the world has shrunk to the dim green glow of the instrument panel and the thunderous vibration of 2,400 horsepower. Flight Lieutenant Evans holds the stick with a light, practiced touch, his eyes scanning the horizon for the telltale silhouette of the French coast. They are a phantom, a whisper of wood and glue screaming through the night just above the waves, too low for the German coastal radar at Cap Green A to get a solid lock. The air is cold and damp, and frost is beginning to creep across the edges of the canopy. 5 minutes to coastline, Alistair. Harrington's calm voice crackles through the intercom. He's hunched over his navigator's table, his face illuminated by the soft glow of his map light, a small pool of order in the violent, roaring chaos of their flight. Target bearing is 0905. We'll cross the coast just south of Le Crotoy. Should be marshland, minimal defenses. Acknowledged, Evans replies, his voice tight. This is the moment the mission truly begins. The Channel is a buffer, a no-man's land. France is the lion's den. You can feel the aircraft shudder as it passes through a patch of turbulent air. Your knuckles would be white. You are flying blind, trusting completely in your navigator's calculations and the sheer power of your engines to outrun any trouble you can't outsmart. The constant, deafening roar of the Merlins is a physical presence, a pressure against your chest. Suddenly, Harrington's voice is sharp. Coastline dead ahead, now. Evans eases the stick forward ever so slightly, dropping them to what feels like mere feet above the ground. The dark gray of the water gives way to the pitch black of the land. They are over France. The character of the flight changes instantly. They are no longer skimming waves, they are hedge-hopping. Trees, farmhouses, and telegraph poles leap out of the darkness and flash beneath them, ghostly shapes in the sliver of a moon. A light flicks on in a distant window and is just as quickly extinguished. Someone knows they are here. "Flak," Harrington says, his voice flat. 10 o'clock, looks like light caliber. Far to their left, a string of incandescent pearls drifts lazily into the sky. They are beautiful and utterly deadly. The German gunners are flying blind, guessing at an engine voice they can't place. The tracers fall harmlessly behind them. Evans doesn't flinch, holding his course steady. Any sudden maneuver could send them careening into a church steeple or a line of high-tension wires. "Target is 7 miles ahead," Harrington announces. "Start your run-up checks." Evans' gloved hands move with practice efficiency. Bomb doors open, bomb's ejector switches armed, fuses set. The Mosquito gives a slight buffet as the doors open into the slipstream, a subtle drag on its speed. Now they are truly committed. 3 miles. Airfield lights are blacked out, as expected. I have the perimeter fence. Harrington's voice is a low, steady murmur, a lifeline of information in the sensory deprivation of the night. I see the control tower silhouette. Your alignment is good, Alistair. Very good. Hold this course. The world outside becomes a terrifying blur of darkness. They are now screaming towards the airfield at over 300 miles per hour. Evans can just make out the faint, ghostly ribbon of the main runway ahead of them, a stretch of perfect, fatal flatness. It's runway 22, 1,800 yards of smooth concrete, their target. 1 mile, stand by. The tension in the cockpit is a physical thing, thick enough to choke on. This is the shooting gallery Evans spoke of. They are deliberately flying into the kill zone of multiple flak towers. Their only defense is speed and the element of surprise. Steady, steady, Harrington coaches.
Altitude 150 feet, climbing gently to 200 for release. Now, Alistair, now. Evans's thumb presses the red button on the control yoke. There is no massive explosion, no earth-shattering roar, just a light, almost imperceptible jolt as the two 500-pound canisters are released from their shackles and fall away into their castings and fall away into the darkness beneath them. He doesn't wait to see what happens. He pushes the throttles through the gate to their maximum emergency power setting. The Mosquito leaps forward as if kicked. The Merlin engines scream and protest as Evans hauls the aircraft into a steep climbing turn away from the airfield, and not a moment too soon. The night erupts. Searchlight beams slash across the sky, hunting for them. Flak towers at both ends of the runway open up, spitting streams of 20mm cannon shells that rip through the air where they were just seconds before. The cockpit is momentarily lit up by the flashes of the muzzle blasts below. Red, green, and white tracers claw at the sky, a furious, belated response from a hornet's nest that has been kicked. Evans throws the Mosquito into a series of violent, evasive corkscrews, his body straining against the G-forces. They're awake now, he grunts into the intercom. Harrington's heading 305 for home. Harrington replies, his voice miraculously calm despite the chaos. They race for the coast, the flak fading behind them. They delivered the payload, 2 metal canisters tumbling end over end in the dark, their barometric fuses ticking down. At precisely 200 feet above the concrete, the castings split along their seams. There is no sound but the rush of the wind. And then a silent, invisible rain of over 5,000 needle-sharp steel spikes scatters across the main runway, peppering the smooth surface. They settle in the dark, glinting faintly in the starlight, 5,000 tiny promises of destruction, each one waiting, patient and sharp, with one point facing the sky. Back in the cockpit of the fleeing Mosquito, Harrington plots their course home. Evans holds the plane steady, his heart still hammering against his ribs. The mission is complete, but as the dark shape of the French coast recedes behind them, a profound uncertainty settles in. They have no way of knowing if it worked, and they saw no explosions, no fires. For all they know, they just littered a runway with scrap metal that will be swept up by the dawn ground crew. They dropped their strained, silent weapons into the dark, and now only the morning would reveal if they had delivered a masterpiece of tactical genius or executed the most spectacular failure of their careers.
Dawn, October 14th, 1943. Abbeville, Drucat Airfield. The air is cold and carries the damp, earthy smell of the French countryside. A thin mist clings to the ground, muffling sound and shrouding the dispersal pens where the Focke-Wulf FW-190s of WWII 26 sit like patient birds of prey. In the pilot's ready room, the atmosphere is one of routine. The smell of bitter ersatz coffee and cigarette smoke hangs heavy. Oberleutnant Klaus Richter, a 22-year-old squadron leader with the Knight's Cross at his throat and a dozen aerial victories to his name, is running a hand over the smooth, worn leather of his flight gloves. He and his men are discussing the night's feeble alert. A lone intruder, they were told. Probably a photo reconnaissance plane that lost its way. Nothing to worry about. Suddenly, the calm is shattered. The high, piercing shriek of the Fliegen-Alarm, the air raid siren, rips through the morning. It's not a drill. Cups clatter onto saucers, chairs scrape back. The pilots are on their feet in an instant, a flurry of motion as they grab helmets and charts. The shout comes from the operations officer. Banditen, eine große Schachtel, Lancaster-Formationen, Höhe 7,000 Meter, Groß auf Amiens, Alarmstadt, Alarmstadt. Bandits, a big box, Lancaster formations, altitude 7,000 meters, course for Amiens, scramble. Adrenaline dumps into Richter's system, a familiar electric jolt. This is what they live for. He is out the door in a heartbeat, sprinting across the grass toward his aircraft, White 7. His ground crew, the Black Men as they are known, are already swarming over the Focke-Wulf. The starter truck is plugged in, the canopy is open. Richter hauls himself up the side of the fuselage and drops into the familiar cockpit. The smells of leather, hydraulic fluid, and high-octane fuel are his church. His mechanic helps him with his harness straps, slapping him on the shoulder for good luck. Gute Jagd, Herr Oberleutnant. Good hunting. Richter gives a quick nod, his mind already in the sky, calculating intercept angles and ammunition counts. He pulls on his helmet, plugs in his radio and oxygen, and gives the signal. With a cough of black smoke and a deep, guttural roar, the 14-cylinder BMW 801 radio engine catches, the massive propeller blades blurring into a transparent disc. All around him, the air is filled with the thunder of a dozen other fighters coming to life. Richter receives clearance from the tower. He is third in line to take off. Ahead of him, Lieutenant Hans FW-190 rolls onto the main runway, his engine note rising to a deafening crescendo. It accelerates smoothly, gathering speed, its tail lifting off the concrete. It's a perfect, textbook takeoff. Han is airborne, climbing steeply to join the squadron leader. Next is Feldwebel-Schmidt. He lines up, pushes his throttle forward, and begins his roll. The aircraft hurtles down the runway, 50 miles per hour, 80, 120. Then something goes terribly wrong. About halfway down the runway, the aircraft gives a violent, sickening lurch to the left. The port side landing gear visibly collapses. A shower of sparks erupts as the metal strut grinds against the concrete.
The wing dips, catches the ground, and the WWII cartwheels in a horrific display of physics. It sheds parts, a wing, the tail, the engine cowling, before erupting into a massive rolling fireball of fuel and metal. A collective gasp goes through the pilots waiting their turn. A tire blowout? On takeoff? It was incredibly rare, but possible. A tragic freak accident. But there is no time to mourn. The Lancasters are getting closer. The control tower, frantic, radios for the next man to go. It's Richter. He taxis past the burning wreckage of Schmidt's plane, the heat washing over his canopy. He feels a knot of unease in his stomach, but his training takes over. He lines up on the runway, his eyes focused on the far end. He takes a deep breath and shoves the throttle to the firewall. The acceleration is immense, pressing him back into his seat. The Focke-Wulf is a beast, and it feels alive under his control. The runway markers flash past in a blur, 100 miles per hour, 120, 140. He is just about to ease back on the stick to lift off when he feels it. A sharp, explosive bang from his right side, followed immediately by an uncontrollable, violent yaw. His starboard tire has blown. Panic tries to claw its way up his throat, but his training is stronger. He fights the controls, jamming the left rudder pedal to the floor to counteract the swerve, but it's no use. The aircraft is a 14,000-pound missile with a mind of its own. He sees the grass at the edge of the runway rushing towards him. Then he sees what is happening ahead. The 4th and 5th aircraft in the scramble, who had taken off moments before him from a parallel taxiway that fed onto the main strip, are also in trouble. One of them is skidding sideways, smoke pouring from its undercarriage. The other has veered sharply and is now careening directly towards the first plane. The impact is apocalyptic. A second fireball blossoms on the airfield, even larger than the first. Richter's own aircrafts lose off the runway, the damaged landing gear strut finally giving way. The plane slides sideways across the wet grass, throwing up huge divots of earth and turf before coming to a jarring, metal-screeching halt, his nose buried in a drainage ditch. He's violently thrown forward, his head striking the gun sight despite his harness. Dazed, his ears ringing, he smells fuel. He fumbles with the canopy release, shoves it open and scrambles out of the cockpit, falling the last few feet to the muddy ground. He stands there, trembling with adrenaline, and stares back at the scene of utter carnage. In the space of 90 seconds, his squadron has been decimated. Schmidt's plane is a burning pyre. 2 more are an entangled, incandescent wreck in the middle of the runway. His own aircraft is crippled. All around the field, 2 more pilots have aborted their takeoffs with shredded tires, their planes now sitting disabled on the taxiways. 6 of Germany's most advanced fighters and their highly trained pilots have been taken out of the fight before a single one of them could even get airborne. He looks at the chaos, the smoke, the flames, the confused and horrified faces of the ground crews, and can only ask himself one question. What in God's name is happening?
The smoke still hangs heavy over Abbeville-Drucat. As the base commander, a stern, decorated Oberst of the old school strides onto the runway. The fires are out, leaving blackened, skeletal husks that were, an hour ago, the pride of the Luftwaffe. Ambulances have ferried away the dead and wounded. The air raid alert was a false alarm. The Lancaster formation was a cleverly spoofed radar signal, a phantom force designed to trigger the scramble. The entire event was a trap. But what kind of trap? Sabotage was the immediate assumption. Gestapo agents are already rounding up the local French ground crew, their faces pale with terror. But one of the surviving pilots, the one who aborted his takeoff last, provides the first clue. He had felt the jolt, but managed to stop his aircraft before it spun out of control. And when his mechanics inspected the plane, they found it. Embedded deep within the shredded remains of his starboard tire was a strange 4-pronged spike of dark, hardened steel. It was wickedly sharp. The Oberst kneels on the runway, his immaculate gray uniform trousers brushing against the oil-stained concrete. A maintenance NCO points to a spot on the tarmac. There, almost invisible against the dark surface, is another one of the objects, and another a few feet away. Soon they are finding them everywhere, scattered for hundreds of yards along the center line of the main runway. It's as if a giant had sown a crop of dragon's teeth overnight. They gather a handful of these strange, malevolent things. They are simple, ancient in design, yet they have accomplished what a squadron of Spitfires often could not. They have grounded the Richthofen of Schwader. The Oberst holds one in his palm. It feels primitive, almost dishonorable. This wasn't a weapon of a soldier. It was the tool of an assassin. Hours later, and an ocean away, the silence in the RAF High Wycombe briefing room is absolute. The same men who had laughed openly at Arthur Davies's proposal are now staring, stone-faced, at a series of large, glossy black and white photographs spread across the oak table. They have just been developed, rushed back by a lone Spitfire pilot who flew a high-altitude reconnaissance mission over Abbeville at dawn. The images are stark and irrefutable. One shows the unmistakable, burned-out shape of an FW-190 tilted at a crazy angle on the edge of the runway. Another shows 2 more aircraft fused together in a blackened, molten heap. A third, taken from a slightly different angle, clearly depicts at least 3 other fighters sitting disabled on taxiways or slewed into the grass, surrounded by emergency vehicles. The runway itself is littered with debris and the dark streaks of fire-suppressing foam. It is a scene of total, unmitigated disaster. Air Vice Marshal Trafford picks up one of the photographs, holding it close to his face. He can see the tiny figures of German soldiers walking the runway, as if searching for something. He knows instinctively what they are looking for. He places the photograph back on the table with deliberate care.
He then picks up one of the sample tire spikes, the same one he had dismissed as a medieval toy and a blacksmith's trinket. He turns it over and over in his thick fingers, feeling its weight, its deadly simplicity. He doesn't look at Davies, not yet. He looks at the other officers around the table. Their expressions are a mixture of shock, awe, and a grudging, newfound respect. The room is thick with the unspoken admission that they had been completely, utterly wrong. 6 confirmed kills, possibly more damaged, 0 Allied casualties, a single mosquito, a crew of 2, and a payload that cost less than a single 20mm cannon shell. The cost-benefit analysis is staggering. It's a war-winning equation. Finally, Trafford raises his eyes and looks directly at Wing Commander Davies, who had been standing quietly at the side of the room. There is no apology in the Air Vice Marshal's gaze. Men of his generation do not offer them readily. But there is something else, a clear, unambiguous acknowledgement. Wing Commander? Trafford's voice is low, but it carries the weight of command across the silent room. What is the production capacity for these devices? Davies allows himself the smallest flicker of a smile. We can make as many as you need, sir. Good, Trafford says, his voice now crisp and decisive. He turns to his aide. Get me the Chief of Staff for Bomber Command on the line. I want every Mosquito squadron with pathfinding capabilities briefed on Operation Puncture by tomorrow morning. I want canisters diverted from ordnance depots immediately. Target lists will be drawn up for every forward fighter base from Holland to Brittany. He pauses, then looks back at Davies. And get this man's project a proper budget, whatever he needs. The laughter was over. The mocking had stopped. In the brutal calculus of the Second World War, results were the only currency that mattered. And on a misty morning in France, a weapon born in the age of swords and shields had proven itself devastatingly effective in the age of the piston-engine fighter. The humble Caltrop, redesigned and reborn as a silent killer, had just become one of the most ingenious and feared weapons in the Royal Air Force's arsenal. It was a testament to the timeless genius of simplicity, a chilling reminder that sometimes the most effective way to defeat a complex modern machine is not with a bigger machine, but with an idea that is, for all intents and purposes, ancient.